Hi, and welcome to Royal Tutorials. I'm Kelsey, and this is the post-classical era. So post-classical is from 600 CE to 1450 CE, and I'm going to try to make this a little bit more brief than usual. So the main theme of the post-classical era is hemispheric integration, and that's basically saying that this whole eastern hemisphere, not so much the western hemisphere yet, that comes in the next era, but mostly this eastern hemisphere is going to integrate. So East Asia, Southeast Asia, Northern Africa, the Middle East, and especially Eastern Europe are going to be interacting with one another mainly through trade. So here's just the EPEX overview. I'm not going to go over that whole thing. I'm going to break it down first. So environmentally, it's still mostly at this point, it's still the environment impacting humans and not so much humans impacting the environment. But disease was a major threat during this era, so the bubonic plague is an example of a disease that you might know, or the Black Death. It happened in the 14th century. The Mongols were definitely helping in spreading it, and it killed over a quarter of the European population. So that was spread through trade. And traders, since they were exposed to these diseases all the time, they gained some immunity to the diseases. And then trade routes differed a bit by the geography of the land or the topography. So the sea routes used monsoon winds to trade, and then the land routes, I can talk about the west versus east in just a second. Here's a plague doctor wearing the mask with the herbs that he thought would help. Here's some plague victims. And then here's a European map. So you can see in Eastern Europe, there's obviously the Mediterranean Sea that's touching all sorts of countries all over here. So those can have port cities with easy access to trade. But then in Western Europe, there's the Alps and other high mountain ranges that make it really difficult for traders to cross. So Western Europe was more isolated during this time. So politically, states became much more powerful. They had elaborate bureaucracies, and they were impacting trade. They taxed trade, but then they also supported it. They protected merchants and travelers because it was good for their economies. And then oasis cities or city states on the coast of the Indian Ocean were flourishing because there were so many traders there. The Mongols formed the largest land-based empire ever, ruled by Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan. They were nomadic pastoralists, and they conquered mostly the East Asian steppes. And like I said before, they spread the plague, or at least helped to. Islam was also founded right around 600 CE by Muhammad, and Islamic states often focused on conquering new lands. So here's some Mongols. Like I said, they're nomadic pastoralists, so they're moving around. It makes them more egalitarian because no one can build up a lot of material wealth because they're on horseback and you can't really carry material wealth. And obviously they're on horseback, so they're pastoralists. Here's kind of a general map of the states happening in the post-classical era. So you could pause and look at that if you wanted. So, for economic, trade is obviously the main idea here. The trade routes that were happening, there were the silk, sea, and sand routes. I'll show a map in just a second. So bulk goods were mostly on the sea routes because ships can transport bulk goods, like large amounts of goods. But on especially the Silk Roads. That was mostly luxury goods like silk and spices and things like that. Sand routes too, because they were on land, and transporting large amounts of goods on land is difficult because it's usually by horseback. Um, China had a monopoly on silk for a long time, so they kind of controlled the Silk Roads. Zheng He, I think I said that right, was a Chinese eunuch who explored via ship, maritime voyaging. That's basically it. And then Marco Polo is a well-known traveler slash trader, but Ibn Battuta was way more legit than Marco Polo and did more exploring. He's good for evidence in an essay. And then specialization intensified because trade was so intense during this time. So here's Ibn Battuta, here's Marco Polo, and here is sea routes are in blue. It's kind of obvious they're on the sea. Silk Road is over here in Asia, especially connecting to China because that's where the source of silk is mostly. And then the sand routes are mostly in North Africa, right over here, but then also a little bit in the Middle East. So culturally, new technology like the camel was being invented. Special sailing sails were also helpful for monsoon winds, new kinds of ships, things like that were making trading easier. And then art and architecture, religious monuments, like always, are growing. So as far as religions are really syncretizing here. So Buddhism spread to China, and that's how Neo-Confucianism started. Neo-Confucianism in China was the mix of the three main religions or belief systems there at the time, which were Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. So those three make up Neo-Confucianism. And then Islam was founded about 600 CE by Muhammad, and the Sunni Shia divide. The Sunnis half believes that the most like worthy should be rulers of Islamic empires, and the Shia believe that only ancestors of Muhammad should be the rulers. So the Sunni's more like the next in line, like power-wise, and Shia is direct blood relation. And Christianity had a schism in 1054 that created the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Catholic churches. Eastern Orthodox was in the Byzantine Empire, and Roman Catholic over in Charlemagne's half of Europe. So Islam. So here's the spread of Islam. You can see it spread a lot. Those are mostly conquering empires. And then here's the split of Christianity into Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic. So this is the Byzantine Empire over here. Whoa. I think I just skipped a lot. Or not. Okay, socially, yeah, so the merchant class increased in wealth and status because trade was so prominent and their merchant goods were being traded. The possession of luxury goods was differentiating classes because luxury goods were being traded so much that those who accumulated a lot were wealthier. The slave trade increased, especially that's mostly on the Indian Ocean. It's hard to transport people across land. It's easier on ships. And China's tribute system basically controlled how China traded with other peoples, and the other groups would offer tribute to China to trade with them. As a kind of a complex system that goes with elaborate bureaucracy. And then feudalism was happening in Europe and Japan. So here's a feudal structure. You can pause and check that out. It's pretty self-explanatory. And more. This is obviously for Europe because it's a Christian outlook, but in Japan they had a belief system going with theirs that had a similar structure to this too. And then here's China's tribute system. So wealthy and luxury goods would go to higher up rulers in China, and then luxury goods often included spices. So here's some spices for you. Here's the tribute system at work. China's emperors were very wealthy, as you can see. So yeah, that's the post-classical era, and I hope that was helpful.